Greetings.
Hey there, thank you for joining me today. Now, you may already know, but this ball lightning sorcerer is very overpowered in season 2. So I finally got mine to level 100. This is actually my 4th character in season 2 that I've gotten to 100. The only one that's left over is the necromancer, but today I just wanted to make a video going over it step by step, how everything comes together in the skill tree, paragons, and what each item does to really get everything rolling and doing things like this, where you're doing just insurmountable amounts of damage. Look at that. But without further ado, let's just go ahead and get right into it. Alrighty, so first let's go into the skill tree. One of the first things I'm going to do is actually remove my item, the Harlequin Crest, the Shako, is because that adds 4 points to every single item here, every single skill, excuse me. So to avoid confusion, I'm going to just remove it. That way we can see what normally would be on that skill. Now, we actually don't have any basic skills. We don't use a basic skill for this build, but we are going to allocate points into Firebolt. The reason why we're going to allocate points into this is because if we read the enchantment effect at the bottom, you deal direct damage from skills and it applies burning damage. So we don't really care about the damage itself, but we want to put Firebolt into our enchantment. What this allows is for every other skill that we are going to be using to do damage, it's going to apply burning effect, which gives us the elemental damage of burning. The reason why we want that is because of this item, Talrasha's Iridescent Loop. And we'll go over that more in depthly later on, but just keep in mind that we're going to want those elemental damages. Next, let's move on to the core skills. So, as part of our passes, we have Devastation first here, and your maximum mana is increased by 3. Very nice upgrade, but the real reason we want that is so we can get to Elemental Dominance. Your core and mastery skills deal 9% multiplicative increased damage when cast above 50%, or excuse me, 50 mana. So because we're going to be getting mana constantly, we're actually going to be above 50 mana quite frequently. So that means that our core and mastery skills are going to deal that increased damage. Next, we're going to put 1 point into Chain Lightning. We actually don't have Chain Lightning in our bar either, similarly to the Firebolt. But another reason we're going to be doing this is, again, for our second enchantment. Chain Lightning forms automatically after spending 100 mana. And we'll go over why that is important later on. Now, for our defensive skills, we have Flame Shield, and then we have Enhanced Flame Shield and Shimmering Flame Shield. Now, Flame Shield engulfs yourself in a flame for 2 seconds, burning surrounding enemies for 13,000 damage. While Flame Shield is active, you are immune. So let's go ahead and see how that looks, because this is kind of important. So as you can see, we activated that, and there was an icon above with a broken chain and a shield with a guy on it. That is the immune icon. Now, part of being immune also applies for what's called unstoppable. So later on we'll see why this is important, but really Flame Shield itself makes you immune to anything. So Flame Shield will actually protect you from the insta kill waves from Bluebird Lilith, and literally as long as you have Flame Shield up within those 2 seconds, there's nothing in the game that can kill you. Then we have our teleport. So transform into a lightning, becoming unstoppable and surging to the target location, dealing X amount of damage upon your arrival. Then we have Enhanced Teleport. Teleport's cooldown is decreased by 0.5 seconds per enemy hit up to 3 seconds. And then Shimmering Teleport. After teleporting, you gain 30% damage reduction for 3 seconds. So Shimmering makes us get a little bit more damage reduction. And then Enhanced Teleport allows us to have more of that uptime on teleport. So if you see a lot of enemies and you teleport right through them, you're going to be doing damage to them as well, but you're also going to decrease the amount of cooldown from the teleport of the next cast. For our passives, we have Elemental Attunement. This is a lucky hit, so critical strikes have up to a 15% chance to reset this cooldown of one of your defensive skills. Can only happen once every 10 seconds. So if we lucky strike, we also have a 15% chance to reset a cooldown of a defensive, so that would include our Flame Shield, our teleport, or our ice armor. Then we have Glass Cannon. Basically it's what it sounds like. You are a massively, you're a cannon that does a lot of damage, but you made out of glass, so you know small hits can kill you or damage you severely. And that's basically what glass cannon means. You deal 30% increased damage, but take 15% more damage. So this is actually a very good way to get a lot of damage there. There's a reason why we have 2 on there, and we'll go over that when we come to the item that comes from the Raiment of the Infinite unique. Then we have ice armor. A barrier of ice forms around you for 6 seconds, absorbing 30% of your base life in damage. While ice armor is active, 5% of your damage is dealt. Is added to the barrier. And then we have enhanced armor. Enhanced ice armor. While ice armor is active, your mana regeneration is increased by 25%. So we have a way of reducing the damage that we're going to be taking. We have a way to create a barrier, and we have increased mana regeneration. So all around a very good one to have here. So for our conjuration, we actually have ice blades here. Now, normally you may see some people use Frost Nova. I did at the beginning, and then we started to realize that Frost Nova, because it doesn't do any damage, it actually doesn't contribute to our Taurasha's elemental damage types. So one of the ways that we get around that is by using ice blades. Ice blades basically conjure a pair of ice blades for 6 seconds that rapidly slash enemies for an X amount of damage and have 40% chance to make them vulnerable. Really, the damage itself is not the relevant part. The relevant part is that we're doing ice damage with it. So that would be this. So these are the ice blades, and they're going to be doing ice damage. Now, because of our firebolt enchantment, they're also doing burning damage, as you can see. Then we have align the elements. You gain 3% damage reduction against elites. For each second you haven't taken damage, from 1 up to 40%. This bonus persists for 2 seconds after taking damage. Now, this isn't really the important one. It is nice, but what we're trying to get to is mana shield here. Every time you spend 100 mana, you gain 21% damage reduction for 5 seconds. Because we're blowing through mana constantly with our ball lightning, essentially you're gonna have a lot of damage reduction up. And then also protection. Using a cooldown grants you 30% of your maximum life as a barrier for 3 seconds. So this is yet another way that we're going to be able to create barriers and through our cooldowns. Then Conjuration Master, you deal 3% increased, a multiplicative increased damage for each active conjuration. So that would be our Ice Blades. So every single time that we use our Ice Blades and it's up and going, we're actually getting 3% increased damage, and it is multiplicative. Next, we're going to go on to the mastery skills. So what we have is our ball lightning. Of course, this is our main skill. And ball lightning discharges a ball of lightning that slowly moves forward, continually zapping enemies for X amount of damage. Then we also have enhanced ball lightning. Bolt lightning's damage rate is increased by 200% of your attack speed bonus. And then Wizard's Ball Lightning. If an enemy is hit at least 4 times by a cast of ball lightning, a crackling energy is formed, and it can only happen 2 times per cast. Now, before we move on with the skill tree, it's important because ball lightning normally looks like this. Okay, so this is how ball lightning normally looks, right? And so that makes it a whole lot harder to be able to proc our passives on it, where it's forming crackling energy. So one of the key things that we're going to need is the gravitational effect from the legendary here. So gravitational, ball lightning orbits around you and deals 25% increased damage. So instead of shooting one ball and it just hovers and moves forward, it just starts to rotate around you. So that's how we're going to be able to do that and constantly do damage. So that's gonna, that gravitational is very key to making the build itself work. At the beginning, it's not completely necessary, but in order to deal damage, you're gonna want to move into that as fast as possible. So when you're in transition, maybe from World Tier 3 to World Tier 4, you may or may not find this gravitational aspect, but try to save one if you can find it, and that way when you want to go into World Tier 4, you can put it on a high level weapon and go ahead and dish out your damage. Okay, so the next thing that we have under our mastery tree here is static discharge. Critical strikes with shock skills have up to 5% chance to form a crackling energy. Really, the reason why we are using that is to get to invigorating conduit. Upon absorbing crackling energy, you gain 12 mana. So this is yet another way that we're going to be gaining mana. So let's go here, do this. All the crackling energy right there has formed. All those little balls around the training dummy, those are crackling energies. Now I'm using up all my mana, so you can see every time I go over it, I gain mana. So it's going to be 12 every single time that I go over them. So this is very important because one of the aspects of the build itself is that you're constantly moving. You're moving around, you're hitting as many enemies as you can, and the more enemies that you hit, the more crackling energy you make, and the more crackling energy you make and you collect, the more mana you have. It's just a cycle. So let's move on to the ultimate skills here, and we come to unstable currents. We are going to put also unstable currents increase your attack speed by 25% while active, and while unstable currents is active, crackling energy pulses 25% faster and costs no charge. But really the main part of unstable currents is the main effect, which is lightning surges within you for 10 seconds. Now whenever you cast a shock skill, a random core, conjuration, or mastering skill is also cast. So if we look at all the skills themselves, right under the rank it says ultimate shock, right? If you go to ball lightning, it says mastery shock. So as long as we're doing ball lightning, we are actually doing shock skills. So a random core, conjuration, or mastery skill will be cast so long as you have unstable currents up. Now for coursing currents, hitting enemies with shock skills increase your critical strike chance by 1%. Resets upon getting a critical strike. Now the reason why we get this is to be able to get conduction. Critical strikes with shocks skills increase your movement speed by 9%. So because we're going to be doing shock skills with our ball lightning constantly, we're going to be critically striking, and so we're going to get movement speed. And then as well as electrocution, enemies deal 15% less damage for 5 seconds after being critically struck by your shock skills. So we're going to get some damage reduction there. And then finally, for our key passive, we're going to use overflowing energy. Crackling energy hits one additional enemy. Each time crackling energy hits an enemy, your shock skills cooldowns are reduced by 0.1 seconds, increased to 0.25 seconds against elites. So this is going to help with our skill cooldowns uptime. So I mean, this is a no-brainer. But that is the skill tree itself. Now the next thing I wanted to go over is the Paragon. Of course, this is a starter one here, and we go through here, and the first one we're going to put is actually called Elementalist. Now Paragon nodes within a range gain 57% bonus to their non-physical damage and damage reduction modifiers. So Paragon nodes are these right here, right? And then the additional bonus that we get from the 40 intelligence is dealing fire, cold, or lightning damage to an enemy increases all damage you deal to them by 5% multiplicatively for 10 seconds, stacking once per element. So this increases our damage that we're dealing, and we are doing a lot of elemental damage with fire, cold, lightning, and poison. We'll get into that a little bit later, but poison is being dealt, and so we're going to get damage from that. That's our starter board. Now the next board is the Elemental Summoner, and the glyph that we're going to be putting here is called Charged. For every 5 intelligence purchased within range, crackling energy deals 10% increased damage. And then for our additional bonus, if we have the enough intelligence within the range, picking up crackling energy grants you 5% increased damage for 5 seconds. So overall, this increases our damage output. Then we head over here to Enchantment Master, and in the Enchantment Master we're going to be putting a reinforced glyph. This grants 100% bonus to all rare nodes, which are these, so pretty much doubles the amount. And if we have the additional bonus, you gain 15% damage reduction while having an active barrier. And since we're going to have active barriers from various sources of our skills, we're pretty much going to have an additional 15% damage reduction. Next, we move on to Ceaseless Conduit. On this board, we're going to put the Territorial Glyph. Now, I don't have this one leveled up all the way, so it's not as strong as the other one. For every 5 dexterity purchase within range, you deal 3.2 increased damage to close targets. And really, because your ball lightning is orbiting around you, they're within that close range, so everything you hit is going to take that increased damage. They're going to be close. And then additionally, if you have the additional bonus, which I don't yet, you gain 15% damage reduction against close enemies. So not only are you going to be dishing out more damage to close enemies, but now you're going to be taking less damage from those close enemies. Next board we have is the Burning Instinct. And the glyph we're going to be putting on here is Destruction. And it says for every 5 dexterity purchase within range, you deal 15% increase critical strike damage. And for the additional bonus, critical strikes increase all damage the enemy takes from you by 2% for 10 seconds up to 12%. Next board is our Frigid Fate. And for Frigid Fate, you deal bonus damage to vulnerable enemies equal to 10% multiplicative of the total amount of your bonus damage with cold, up to a maximum of 30%. So because we're dealing damage with cold with our ice blades, we have the current bonus of 24%. And the glyph that we're going to be putting here is called Adept. And for every 5 intelligence within the range, mastery skills gain 7.9% increased damage. So our total, because this one is, I believe, level 16, we get 103% mastery skill damage. And for the additional bonus, mastery skills have an increased 20% increased area. So the mastery skill, which is unstable currents, actually are spread out 20% more. Then for the final board, we have Static Surge. Static Surge, after spending 78 mana, your next cast of Chain Lightning or Charged Bolt makes enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds and restores 10% of your mana. Now, as we discussed, since we put Chain Lightning into our enchantment, after every 100 mana that we spend, we're going to cast a Chain Lightning. And so every single time that happens, we're already spending a bunch of mana, so the 78 quota is met. And so the next cast of Chain Lightning makes enemies vulnerable. So this is going to be another way to make enemies vulnerable. And the glyph that we're going to put here is Exploit. This is another one that I don't have leveled up all the way yet. But for every 5 dexterity purchase within your range, you deal 3.2% increased damage to vulnerable targets, because we are going to be making enemies vulnerable in various ways. This is yet another way to deal extra damage. And then for the additional bonus, dealing damage to a vulnerable enemy increases your damage by 1% for 6 seconds up to 10%. And that is our Paragon board. Now this is subject to change because the Abitur of Zero is coming, so I'm going to actually try the Abitur of Zero with the way that it is and just kind of make tune-ups and changes as we go along. But for the time being, this is the way that we are going to actually set it up as. Now I wanted to take this chance to go ahead and go into our items. So how do our items come together? What aspects are we using? And basically, I have the Harlequin Crest, the Shaco, but really what you're going to want here, if you don't have this, which I'm guessing most people won't, is the Godslayer Crown. The Godslayer Crown is going to be able to help out with that damage output. And the Godslayer Crown also includes a cooldown reduction, maximum life, crowd control duration, and damage. And then as well, for the effect, when you stun, freeze, or immobilize an enemy or damage a boss, it pulls nearby enemies to you, and you deal an extra 30 to 60% increased damage to them for 3 seconds. This effect can only occur once every 12 seconds. So the Godslayer Crown is definitely going to be the best in slot situation if you don't have the Uber Unique here. But I use the Uber Unique because the amount of damage, life, and resource and cooldown reduction is just invaluable. Next, I want to talk about the chest piece that we have. You're going to be looking for the Raiment of the Infinite. This is dropped by Lord Zir or Varshan. Now, for Varshan, when you're a sorcerer, by the way, I think that the drops are bugged because I've been getting a lot of sacred items from him, or uniques that are sacred. I'm not understanding why that's happening in World Tier 4 at, level 80, 90 plus, but whatever. So both of them have the chance to drop Raiment of the Infinite. I think that the chances are slower than the other ones because it took me forever to get this. But without really going into much of that, Raiment of the Infinite is a very important part because while it includes 47 intelligence, damage to close enemies, damage to stunned, and the 2 ranks to glass cannon, which is this right here. So it lets us do more damage. The important part about this is after using teleport, close enemies are pulled to you and stunned for 2.7 seconds in this case, but teleport's cooldown is increased by 20%. So one of the ways that, and I'll show this of course later on, is that when you teleport into a pack of enemies, you're going to pull them close to you. All the close ones are going to come right next to you. And because you have these balls of lightning spinning around you, you're just going to annihilate them as soon as they get pulled into you. And yes, now it isn't going to increase the cooldown by 20%, but because of all the other effects that we have that allow us for potentially having automatically reduced cooldown for our defensive skills, which are these, which include teleport, we're not really too worried about the cooldown increase there. Now for the gloves, we're going to put the conceded aspect on there, and that's dealing 22% increased damage while you have a barrier. So we are going to have barrier up with this build in several ways. So every time their barrier is up, you can be sure that you're going to be dealing more damage. We want the gloves themselves. We want attack speed, critical strike chance, intelligence, and preferably either a lucky hit to regain resource or critical strike chance against injured enemies. I wasn't able to find the perfect ones here, but they're pretty close to what I want. Now, next thing here is for our pants, Tibalt's Will. Tibalt's Wills are very important. Tibalt's Will are going to help you basically get mana back. Okay. Now Tibalt's Will, it allows you to do more damage. So our first affix on here is 26.2 damage, 3 to 4 potion capacity. I don't have the 4, but really it doesn't matter too much. Maximum resource, it could be a whole lot better. Mine's is pretty low. And then damage reduction from close. But the main effect of Tibalt's, what we're looking for is the dealing of increased damage while unstoppable and for 4 seconds after. And when you become unstoppable, you gain 50 of your primary resource back. So becoming unstoppable is very important. And we have several ways of doing that. Well, one of the ways that we're going to do that is actually by using our teleport. So let's use up all our mana here. When you use our teleport, you're actually unstoppable for the time that you're actually teleporting, which is short. But as you can see, we got all of our mana back just from using that. Let's show that again. And we got all our mana back. So when you become unstoppable, you gain back 50 of your resource, and you're doing more damage. Now, there is another way that we become unstoppable, and that's through our vampiric power, which is metamorphosis. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but this is another way that we become unstoppable. As you can see, the broken chain right here, that tells you that you are unstoppable. Let's do that one more time. And I get resource back. Now, all of our resource, we have 122, and it says that we gain 50. But that 50 that we are supposed to be getting is affected by our resource generation affixes, like on our rings here. And I also have it on here on the Harlequin Crest and on the Taurashas. So that resource generation affects the amount that you get back. So even though it says 50, if you have increased resource generation, you're going to get more than 50, whatever the amount total is that you have a resource generation. So that's why you see my mana just refill up to max completely. Now, of course, now for our boots, we have Flicker Step. Flicker Step 24 to all stats, very nice. 24% movement speed, very good. It's always sought after for movement speed on boots. Ultimate skill damage and damage reduction. Now, while all these things are nice, what we're really looking for is the effect, the unique effect, which is each enemy you evade through reduces your active ultimate cooldown by 4 seconds, up to 10 seconds. So, in our case, our ultimate cooldown is, if we look at it, unstable currents. And this says every time that we evade through enemies, it cools down by 4 seconds. So let's go ahead and use our unstable currents, 30 plus seconds. Now I'm going to evade through the dummy and see what happens to the cooldown. Keep an eye on it. It drops by 4. Look at that. So Flicker Step is going to be one of the ways that you're going to have you're gonna have an ability to have the unstable currents maximum uptime on that. And that's why you want to be moving around a lot, right? So you use your ball lightning, move around, use your ball lightning, move around, teleport, move around. You want to be moving around and using that evade as much as possible to help out with the unstable current cooldown. Now, attacks reduce evades cooldown by 1.5. This is the implicit of the flicker step. So every time that I attack, it reduces the evade cooldown. So if I evade, I have a 4-second cooldown before I can evade again. Okay. However, if I'm attacking, I can use it, but look at the attacks. It just jumps from 4 to 0 because I'm attacking so much. So because you're attacking so much, the ball lightning does so much damage. Basically your evades are going to be almost 100% uptime. So you don't have to worry about getting boots that have, you know, the 3 or 4 extras. This is going to be enough so long as you're attacking. Next, for our weapon, we have the gravitational twin blade. As I mentioned to you, the gravitational aspect is very key to this build, as it makes the ball lightning swirl around us. But for the weapon itself, what you really want to prioritize is making sure that it's a dagger, so that way you get damage to close enemies. That's the implicit. And then as well as high item power. So the more the item power on a weapon, the higher the damage output. After you consider that, then you go ahead and look into what the aspects that you want on there. So once you have a high damage weapon, then you can consider the aspects. So what we want is intelligence, all stats, damage to close, and mastery skills. I personally don't have that. I only have one of them, but it doesn't really matter because I have a 925 item. I have my gravitation. I'm doing a lot of damage. Granted, you always want to keep a lookout for that. But a 925 item is going to be a perfect roll of an 825. So you want to go with a 925. Now, I will say that there is a range, right? So if you have, like, let's say a 730 item and a 750 item, but that 730 item for the weapon has better affixes than the 750, then you could go with the 730 item, but no more than that, because then you're losing out on a lot of power. Now for the Storm Swell Enigma Cube here, our offhand, basically we're going to put the Storm Swell affix on here, and this is where you deal 28% increased damage to vulnerable enemies while you have a barrier. So because we're going to be having barriers quite often, and because we're making enemies vulnerable quite often, we're going to be automatically doing much more damage. So you know, you want to make sure you have that on there. And then for the cube itself, of course, you want high item power. Make sure you have a resource generation, cooldown reduction, mana cost reduction, and critical strike chance. I personally, on this one, I don't have it, but 925 and mana cost and resource generation for me is very good. Let's go to our necklace. Our necklace, we're going to put disobedience on there. This is for armor increase. We don't have a lot of ways to getting armor for our sorcerer here, so this is going to help us a long way for survivability. And really what you want on the necklace itself is the mana cost, cooldown, ranks to all mastery, and of course movement speed. Now I'm unable to find a good amulet, and the best roll I could get is 12% damage here. I'm already like 6 million in per roll on this, so I'm not going to waste any more money on it. But yeah, preferably you want that movement speed on there. It's also going to help with other things. For our first ring, our recharging loop. So the one that you want on here is called recharging. Each time a chain lightning bounces, you gain 2 mana. Okay. So whenever chain lightning procs, all right, and it bounces, basically what's going to happen is that you're going to get 2 mana back. And because we're constantly doing unstable currents, because we're constantly spending mana, chain lightning is going to be proccing very often, and this is yet another way that you're going to be getting mana. Of course, in the ring itself, you want critical strike chance, resource generation, life, and maximum mana if possible. And then for the last ring, very important, this is going to actually bring us a lot of damage, is the Talrasha's Iridescent Loop. This was added to Varshan's drop table. And this is not just a seasonal item. This has been added to the base game. So go kill Varshan, you'll be able to get one yourself. But essentially, you know, while the affixes on there are good, what we're looking for is the unique effect. So it says for each type of elemental damage you deal, you're going to gain 14% increased damage for 4 seconds. Dealing elemental damage refreshes all bonuses. So the reason why we have the ice blades, the reason why we have the lightnings, and the reason why we're able to why we put the firebolt as an enchantment to do burning damage is so that we can deal as many elemental type damages. So with the ice blades, we're doing cold and burning, and with the ball lightning, we're also doing electric damage. So if we look at it down here, that's what's going to tell you right there that you're getting the bonus from the Talrashas, right? And it says 4 on there. You know, you may be wondering, well, why does it say 4 if you've only done 3, which is cold, lightning, and fire? So we are actually also doing poison damage, and that comes from this particular vampiric power, but we'll get into that in just a second. But that's the reason why it's 4. Now, one of the things I want to get into before we move into the vampiric powers is the aspects. There are certain aspects in the game that are unnecessarily rare, I guess. Recharging is one of them, gravitation is another, and sometimes conceded. I am level 100 and I have literally found 3 gravitationals. One of them was perfect, I saved it, and I have found 2 rechargings the entire game. And I've done blood harvest, I've done a bunch of nightmare dungeons, and I've re-rolled my my obols for rings, and I still haven't been able to find that many. And as you can see, it's only 2 out of the potential 3. So if you do find a recharging aspect, if you do find a gravitational aspect, be wary of how you use it, because if you're getting close to going to the next world tier, I would just save it if you can for a better item, because for some reason Blizzard likes to make these things excessively rare. So just a fair warning on that. You know, save those aspects. Alrighty, let's get into the vampiric powers. So as I mentioned, we're going to be doing poison damage, and the way that that comes from is from this vampiric power called infection. So hitting enemies with direct damage infects them with pox. Inflicting pox 8 times on an enemy expunges their infection, dealing X amount of damage and poison. So when we go ahead and damage something, it's going to give them that pox, and it's going to poison damage them. Even though we don't see it, even though there's no real indication that they're getting poison damaged, the way that we know is because we're also getting the poison proc on here. So even though we're only using ice, fire, and lightning, when I use all of this, we have 4 elementals. So where's that 4th one? It's the poison from this power. Okay, so you're going to want that on there first. Second power on here, the metamorphosis. Now, this one's a little bit tricky because I level it up all the way because I really don't care, but leveling it up all the way in conjunction with Tibalt's Will means that you have to wait longer until you become unstoppable. So let's read it. When you evade, you turn into a cloud of bats, becoming unstoppable for 4 seconds. Enemies along your path take X amount of damage and are inflicted with vampiric curse. So at first it's 2 seconds, then 3, then 4. Now, people do not like to level this up because if I evade, I now have to wait 4 seconds again to evade again and become unstoppable. Now I can evade before those 4 seconds if my evade is cooled down, but I won't be able to become unstoppable twice within those 4 seconds. So a lot of people just like to go ahead and leave it at the first one, so that way every 2 seconds you can literally evade and become unstoppable and proc Tibalt's Will and gain that primary resource back. But really, I don't care. We have so much ways of getting mana. I just level it up, you know, for the damage itself and whatever. But you're gonna want that way you can have another way of regenerating mana. Next one is anticipation. Your ultimate skills gain 20% cooldown, so it's a great way to help with the uptime. Your ultimate skills also deal 12% multiplicative increased damage for each nearby enemy affected by your damage over time effects. So anticipation, when we use the skills, everything's going to be burning. Burning is a damage over time, so we're going to be getting a benefit from that. Then we have Prey on the Weak. You deal 16% multiplicative increased damage to vulnerable enemies. Enemies are vulnerable while affected by vampiric curse from other powers. So because we're going to be making enemies vulnerable through metamorphosis as well. So when you go like this, they turn purple, you see? You're going to be doing more damage to them because of this. And then last one, Ravenous. Lucky hit up to a 20% chance to increase your attack speed by 40% of your total movement speed for 6 seconds. My current bonus is 49.6. It could be much better, but for my necklace, I am lacking the movement speed there. So now that we're in a nightmare dungeon here, I want to showcase how we go about, you know, like the skill loops and what the things to look out for. So one of the first things you need to look out for is the suppressor effect. So that's the one where the bosses or elites have the dome over them. The suppressor affix will actually destroy your ball lightnings or make them disappear. So when you come across a suppressor, what you want to do is just kind of like teleport inside of it or rush inside of it and just start spamming your chain lightning. Another thing that's going to ruin your chain lightning is a wall aspect, the waller aspect. So that's when the mobs, what they do is they create walls where you can't destroy them or move past them, and those walls themselves will actually destroy the ball lightning. But let's go ahead and get into it here. So let's see where the mobs are. And so what I like to do is go ahead and pump up the ball lightning. Okay, just pump it up and then go ahead and teleport inside of it, inside of the mobs. Look at that. It's gonna kill my ball lightning. Watch, I'm gonna do ball lightning, go inside, and it kills them. So you want to just teleport inside of it and just kill them as much as possible. And just keep spamming the ball lightning. Keep moving on and proccing your skills. All right, let me go back here for a second. So we do the ball lightning. As you approach the pack, you want to you go right ahead and teleport right into them. The reason why is now we're going to restore all that mana you just used to create your ball lightning like that. And at the same time, it's going to draw all that pack in towards you and kill them automatically. Once you do that, you can go ahead and start proccing up all your other skills. And then just keep it going like this. You just want to keep it moving. As long as you're hitting the enemy, you're going to see that as long as you're hitting enemies, your evade cooldown is going to stay up. And just keep an eye on, because your teleport is also going to occasionally cool down on its own because of the skills that we have. Here we go with the suppressor here. But as you can see, I teleported right in the middle of them. And it pulled them all towards me, and then I'm generating new ball lightning. All right. So the key thing with the ball lightning is to constantly be moving, constantly be using your teleport, constantly be using your evade. That's going to allow you to have the ultimate uptime. And as soon as your defensive skills, which is flame shield, which is ice armor, and the what's the other one, the teleport comes up, you want to prop them as soon as possible. Don't leave them sitting there, because the ball lightning or the sorcerer in general is pretty squishy. Like, you're going to be killed by a lot of things. So the faster you can kill, the more you can move around, the more survivability you'll have. Just want to keep moving around, proccing all your skills, making sure you're getting the most damage and damage reduction as possible.
I'm not ready yet. I need time to prepare that.
Alrighty, so now in this room, in this middle room, whenever you see a middle room like this in a nightmare dungeon, do not bother with killing as many enemies as possible. Try to do the objective and get out, because anything that you kill within this room does not actually provide XP, so it's a giant waste of time. But yeah, let's go ahead and keep moving with the dungeon itself. We'll finish it off. See if we can find a Waller enemy.
I need time to prepare that.
Here it is, that suppressor. Always ruining your day.
I need time.
Go ahead and keep rocking it. Move on from pack to pack. And that's another thing with the teleport. It has a pretty high range. So if you're able to get within the range of where the next pack is, it actually teleports you quite a way. So let me see here if I can show you real quick. They're all coming towards me. And it teleports you pretty far.
I'm not ready yet.
As you can see, we're barely taking any damage. We're just killing everything. What you want to do is constantly have those ball lightnings up. That way, whenever you hit an enemy, you just erase them immediately, right? Now, of course, with these suppressors, we're not able to do that because we have to generate our ball lightning again. But as practice, you just want to have as many balls up as possible. That way, when an enemy just touches you, they just die instantly. You can see right here.
I'm not ready yet.
Now, of course, me killing all these enemies is kind of pointless just because I'm already at a 100. So, but as you're leveling up, I mean, you're going to level up so quick with this sorcerer that it's not even going to be funny. All right, we're going into a boss now. Let's park all of our things, do this, and jump right into it. And deleted. Where'd he go? There it is. That's it. That's really all there is to it with the ball lightning sorcerer. It's extremely powerful, extremely broken. I foresee that this is not going to go past season 3. But let's enjoy what we have in here. Of course, if you guys have any questions about the build itself, leave it down in the comments. And if you would, go ahead and leave me a sub, a like, a comment, anything that helps me to grow. Thank you very much, and you have a great rest of your day.